Everybody, I'm Dr. Valerie Leva. I am a clinical supervisor with Stan County BHRS, and I provide these trainings to interns and new associates. Today, we're going to talk about distress tolerance and emotion regulation, two skills that are really important for most of the clients we see. I'm going to share my screen. I can troubleshoot my PowerPoint for just a second. There we go. And open the PowerPoint for today. There we are. So we can skip the Zoom training reminders. The learning objectives for today are to understand how distress tolerance and emotion regulation are really key trans diagnostic skills to use. They were developed for dialectical behavioral therapy, which was a method developed to treat people who experience borderline personality disorder. But over the decades, many therapists have used distress tolerance and emotion regulation for other situations where people are chronically distressed or have chronic challenges in managing their emotions, everything from trauma to anxiety to depression. The goal today is for you to learn and practice 3 distress tolerance interventions and 3 emotion regulation interventions. Now, for a review, dialectical behavioral therapy includes 4 key skills: distress tolerance, emotion regulation. Mindfulness is usually taught first. And once the person has more distress tolerance and emotion regulation skills, you look at interpersonal effectiveness. So, how they can manage their distress and emotions better in order to be able to be fully and healthily engaged in relationships with others. I talked earlier about trauma treatment. Trauma treatment frequently incorporates DBT skills, rather, especially mindfulness, distress tolerance, and emotion regulation. And it also includes skills from ACT, acceptance and commitment therapy, especially the concept of defusing from emotions and being present in the moment. And by defusing, I mean to separate oneself. A fusion is 2 things put together to separate the emotional experience from the person's sense of self and identity. Just acceptance and commitment therapy also was developed to um, learn how to accept unwanted private experiences, such as emotions and distressing thoughts and feelings, which are out of personal control, and moving towards a value filled life. So, there are other skills in ACT that might be helpful in working with folks who experience distress. So, from a DBT perspective, distress tolerance goals include crisis survival skills. Now, a crisis can be anything from what anyone else would say as a crisis: your house burned down, death of a loved one, loss of a job, to a smaller C crises that frequent are the frequent experience of folks who have trouble managing distress. So this could be, the experience of maybe going to the county office to get an increase in food stamps, having to stand in line or sit in line for 3 hours to get that done, and then being turned down by the county office, and then being very frustrated because you don't know what else you're going to do to engage in acquiring those resources. So that can be a very distressing experience for someone and can be a crisis for someone. So let the client decide what the crisis is and define that. The second goal of distress tolerance is reality acceptance skills. Um, I frequently get distressed when I go to Costco and maybe I'm on my feet an hour shopping and then on my feet another 30 to 45 minutes, sometimes checking out. Then I've got to take that cart of groceries to my car and load my car. There's a lot of construction in the city I live in, so it takes me a long time to get home. And by the time I get home, I'm really pretty distressed sometimes if I've not got my other resources that I'm able to use. Well, my perception is I'm very distressed because of all these circumstances, but the reality is I might be physically tired, and this took more time than I thought it might. And so the reality is it's time and physical stamina versus my perception of it is that the city decided to do all this construction and it's annoying me. And oh my God, Costco is um, so full of customers. We really should have another Costco. Why do I have to go there? So you can see the difference in the thinking process. This is a video developed by a gentleman that has a website called Self-help tunes, Toons. And I find these videos very useful to use with consumers. They're very straightforward. He's a decent narrator. I've looked at about 5 or 6 videos on this website. They're all very accurate and they're to the point. So take 13 minutes to click on this video about distress tolerance skills and give it a watch before we move on. Welcome back from the video. I'm going to go over 4 different skills that were discussed in this video. 2 that are, excuse me, easier to learn techniques, and 2 that take a little more thought and effort. The easier to learn techniques are stop and tip. I added an extra P to the tip, as some other people do. Um, and I like to create visuals. So you notice that he had visuals in the video that demonstrated the idea. I like to make visuals for consumers as well because sometimes it's helpful. And feel free to copy this piece of the PowerPoint and share with consumers. Take a picture of it on your phone and share that file with consumers as well. The first one is stop, and the S stands for stop. Sometimes I will associate a visual like a stop sign or a song with it. I'm kind of old school, so I think of stop in the name of love, right? So first thing is to stop. The T stands for take a step back. So I usually say to people, take a breath and take a step back. Sometimes people will do this physically, taking a step back. Because what you need to do then is observe the situation. In my example about my feelings of being overwhelmed, when I go to Costco and then drive home and load and unload groceries, I take a step back from that and it's like, well, did I give myself enough time for this activity? Am I trying to fit too many things into my day? So observe the situation. Try to get some data from the situation. And the P stands for proceed mindfully. So taking that step forward again after I've thought about it, which is a mindful activity, and plan about how I'm going to proceed. So again, stop, very easy skill to learn, fairly easy to remember. Tip stands for tip the temperature. So there is a phenomena called the diver's response. And in the video, the narrator talked about putting some cold water on your face. When I was a little girl and I bumped myself and started crying or whatever, my mom always said, go wash your face and get a drink of water. And it seemed to work. But the diver's response is very specific. You need to get that cold temperature from your upper lip to your hairline and from temple to temple. Because when these nerve endings sense freezing cold water, like ice water, your brain is saying, you're in the water and you're going to drown. And it clears away every other process that's going on in your brain and your physiology. So if somebody's experienced a panic attack, or they're having thoughts of rage or depressive thoughts that they can't stop, sometimes using this technique will stop them. Now, some of the clients I've taught this technique to will put a washcloth in a bowl of freezing water or ice water and put it on their face. Some clients will stick their head in the freezer. And I've had a few clients that will fill a bowl full of ice water, hold their breath, and dip their whole face in. It's amazing how this works. And I would challenge you to try one aspect of this technique for yourself when you are trying to change your thoughts that you just can't seem to break free from. The I in TIP stands for intensive exercise. A lot of people will run. You can run in place, lift weights. And I need to stop the recording for just a second. Sorry about that interruption. So intensive exercise, whatever you can do right where you are. I don't recommend doing things that will harm you, like punching a wall, but do some intensive exercise that gets your heart rate up. Again, you can see how we're changing physiology here to change emotional experience. The first P stands for paced breathing. A technique that's familiar to a lot of people is box breathing. You breathe into the count of 4, hold your breath to the count of 4, breathe out to the count of 4, hold your breath to the count of 4. I'm also a fan of long exhale breathing. When we exhale, We lower our heart rate slightly. When we inhale, our heart rate goes up slightly. So I'll ask people to breathe into the count of 4 and breathe out to the count of 8. And they will find that slowly their heart rate is coming down, which in part feeds the fight or flight response and the rest of your physiology. The second P stands for progressive muscle relaxation or paired muscle relaxation. And this is a technique of tensing your muscles to the count of 4 or 5 and then releasing those muscles to the count of 4 or 5, and tensing them again, releasing them again. So you either start with the top of the head and go down, or you start with your feet and go up. Tense up your feet, release, tense up your feet, release, tense up your thighs, release, etc. And the visual on this slide gives you a sense of how to do that. The more advanced distress tolerance skills include the memory aids of accepts and improves. And as the gentleman in the video did, as he went through each of these, he talked about how to take each one of these letters and figure out an activity to go through with it. What I do in the live session is I ask people to think about a time when you were distressed, pick either accept or improve, write down for yourself what you would do in each of these interventions, and then run a videotape of yourself doing that. So think about that as we're going through each of these. How would you do this for yourself? So the A in accepts stands for an activity. It's do something. Just get up and do something. It can be pacing around the house or up and down the street. It can be washing dishes, pulling the vacuum. It can be watching a movie, listening to radio, reading the newspaper. Just do something. The C stands for contributing. Do something for someone else. Ask your companion, would they like a glass of water? A larger scale version of this would be volunteering. Seeing if somebody in the room needs anything, or doing something nice and unexpected for someone. The second C stands for comparison. This isn't as bad as my previous experience, the experience of other people. When I did my PhD, I was surprised to find that I had to take 4 courses in statistics, and I was not good in statistics in my master's program. So during break in every one of those 4 statistics classes, every week I'd go in the ladies' room, I'd look in the mirror and say, thousands of other people are taking statistics courses this semester, and I'm going to pass as they're going to pass. So again, comparison. I'm not the only one doing this. This isn't as bad as it was before. Other people have it worse. That's how you do that. Emotions stands for emotional music or a movie. So if you're feeling a particular feeling, watch a movie or emotion that helps you cue into the opposite feeling. So just a change in emotion. So if you're sad, watch a funny movie. If you're feeling angry, watch a calming movie. I also Google on YouTube those 4, 6, 8 hour background noises of beach noises or nature noises or piano music or guitar music or whatever. So these things, for anybody that has a smartphone, these things are accessible to them. The P stands for pushing away. So you either leave the situation in real life or you leave it mentally. In the video, he said, pull the covers over your head and imagine yourself being someplace else. So again, this is a distraction technique, and it gets you to turn your back on the situation for a few minutes and imagine yourself being somewhere else. You can use thoughts, which is what the T stands for, times tables, counting to 10, thinking about how to say the same sentence in another language. So using your cognitive skills, again, as a distraction. So thinking of ways to distract yourself with a different thought. And then the final one is sensations. This is a grounding technique. So hold an ice cube, take a cold shower, take a hot shower. If you're inside, go outside. If you're outside, go inside. Feel the sun, feel the wind, feel the snow, feel the rain. So again, this is a grounding technique that takes you out of your current physiological state. So that is accepts. And the other one is improve. So look, we either accept our distressing situation or we improve it. The accept skills are a lot around distracting yourself, but improving is about thinking forward or thinking differently. So the I in improve stands for imagery, imaginal rehearsal, image being successful, overcoming the situation that's distressing to you. Run that video in your mind. So we learned when we talked about imaginal rehearsal, your brain fires up the same way when you imagine doing it the same as it does when you actually do it. So it lays down those neural pathways that are going to be helpful to train your brain into a different state of being. The M stands for meaning. What can you learn from this situation? What's the big takeaway here? Does this situation have meaning in my life? What can I learn from this situation? The P stands for prayer or spiritual activities. And when I talk about these types of practices, I treat this as a cultural phenomena and I ask clients what works for you. Do you have any spiritual or religious practices that are helpful to you? So this can be just meditation or guided imagery for people that are religious. Like people who are Catholic, I tell them you don't need a rosary, physical rosary. To say the rosary, you just use your 10 fingers and hold each finger as you're going through the rosary. So take whatever is helpful and meaningful to the client and help them figure out what that practice might be. The R in improve stands for relaxing. So you take a warm bath, drink hot tea, put lotion on your hands, massage your feet. Again, doing some activity that's physically relaxing, that's going to calm the physiology down. The O stands for one thing. Do one thing right now. Whatever it is that you're doing, focus on that task. Again, it's helpful to do some physical tasks like washing dishes, taking out the trash, walking up and down the street. Try not to do a repetitive one because that might lead you back to your thoughts, but just focus on this task right now. The V stands for vacation, again, in real life or in one's imagination. Imagine being at the beach, imagine being at the mountains, imagine being in the snow, imagine being in a sauna. I mean, whatever is an escape for you, imagine that. And then the E stands for encouragement. Affirmations. I will have clients write down the self affirmations in their phone or take a picture of it if they see something in public. There are apps that will send you an affirmation every morning. You can write them down on index cards and post them all over your house. So there's lots of ways of engaging in affirmations. So hopefully, as you were going through one of these, you can think of a situation. I'm going to go to this slide. Think of a recent time you were feeling distressed. Pick either accepts or improve. Write down what you would do for each step of the intervention. And then think through each step. Imagine doing the activity. And you will find yourself beginning to feel some relaxation from whatever distress. When we think about a distressing situation, our physiology ramps up again. But when we engage in these activities, they're going to calm down because the imaginal rehearsal is lining up that neural pathway for you to be successful doing this as if you were actually doing the thing. So I'm going to give you a few minutes to do that before we move on to the next set of slides. Okay, so now we're shifting from distress tolerance to emotion regulation skills. And from a DBT perspective, the overall focus of emotion regulation is to accept the emotion or change the emotion. Experiencing emotions is part of life. And we may engage in practices that are helpful to us in the short term, such as suppressing the emotion or avoiding the emotion, but that doesn't work in the long run. In the long run, you've got to accept the emotion as part of your life experience. Or if you can't tolerate that emotion in the moment, then do something to change the emotion. From a DBT perspective, there are three skills related to emotion regulation. First is understanding your emotion. So naming it, understanding it, educating yourself about when you experience it, understand when you don't experience it, maybe what's different about that situation. The second skill is to reduce emotional vulnerability. So we'll talk about some of the skills to use from a DBT perspective that it reduces emotional vulnerability. And in the end, the goal is to decrease emotional suffering. I have seen many, many people with with borderline personality disorder, and I use DBT with them. And it's very sad to me to see folks in later life who have been unsuccessful in in acquiring these skills and practicing these skills because they experience a lot of suffering. And as challenging as their behavior may be to me, one of the things I do to help get past that is to dig deep for my empathy and really recognize the depth of their suffering. And so the DBT skills were developed to help alleviate that depth of suffering. So, from an ACT perspective, emotion regulation skills include defusing, separating from the negative emotional experience, accepting the emotional experience, and then focusing on and turning toward a value filled and satisfying life. So, a lot of the work in ACT is around identifying what your values are. So, these are not just goals or things you want to do, but the way you want to be as a human being. I want to be somebody that my kids look up to. I want to be someone that other people can trust. So, these are your values. And in ACT, you help the person identify the emotional experience, accept it, and turn away from it because emotions come and go and focus on being that person that you want to be. So this is another video that I'm going to ask you to watch. It's a 9-minute video about DBT and ACT emotion regulation skills. So take those 9 or 10 minutes to watch it and come back when you're done. Okay, so I just put up 3 techniques in each modality of work. So I have 3 techniques for dialectical behavioral therapy are to name, acknowledge, and validate your emotions. So again, I'll pull out the feelings wheel for people that are not good at language around their emotions. Acknowledge that you're feeling this way, whatever it is. Say, I'm feeling angry. Right? I'm feeling really pissed off right now. I'm going to name it. I'm going to acknowledge it. I'm going to validate it. There's sort of metaphysical power in naming something. Once you name it, you know what it is and you can work with it. And just acknowledge that it's a part of being human. And if you don't want to feel that way anymore, then engage in some of these other activities, such as calming the body to calm emotions. So this is using mindfulness to calm those feelings. So I read a lot about the brain, and I've recently read an article that postulates that a higher percentage of our brain is given over to regulating emotions than it is to cognitive processes. And this makes sense to me because emotions are not just these amorphous feelings that we feel, but there's a physiology connected to it. So it's a mind-body connection that I think takes a lot of brain power to compute. So when we engage in mindfulness activities, we can then learn how to calm our body. And you can't do it once or twice and say it doesn't work. It's something that you have to practice. So I ask people, how did you learn to ride a bike? How did you learn how to do something that was hard to do? It takes a lot of practice to do it. So as frustrating as that may be to some people, that's the reality of gaining these skills. And the third thing under DBT emotion regulation techniques is to act opposite to how your emotions are urging you. So if your emotions are urging you to feel sad, imagine that you're happy. So act as if you're happy. Smiling, there's research to show that when we smile, it activates parts of our brain that then releases a small amount of dopamine and feel good neurochemicals. So kind of fake it till you make it is what I've told people in the past. Act as if you're a happy person. What does a happy person do? And this is also some psychoeducation, an opportunity for that. If somebody's angry, I'll ask them what's the opposite of angry. A lot of people will say calm. So what does a calm person do? What does somebody do when they're feeling calm? Well, they unclench their fists, they take a deep breath, they take a step back. So I encourage them to act opposite to how your emotions are urging you. So those are some DBT techniques. ACT has some really fun emotion regulation techniques, and I use a lot that were developed by Russ Harris, who wrote the book, The Happiness Trap. And on the final slide is a resource page, and I've got a link to his YouTube channel because he has really good short videos on each of these techniques. So the first thing is to defuse from that emotional experience, so gain some psychological distance from the emotions. So when you ask a client, how are you feeling today? They will say, I am happy, sad, angry, scared, pissed off, etc. So they have fused their emotional experience with their identity. So the first step in coaching them is to say, okay, instead of saying I am, say I am feeling and name the feeling. And once they get practice at doing that, then you push it into a cognitive process and say, I am having the thought that I'm feeling, etc. So you can see how each of these steps takes it farther from defusing the emotion from the person's sense of identity. The one that is absolutely my favorite is think about the self-talk that we all have in our head, right? We all have it. Sometimes we're aware of it. So I help people become aware of their self-talk, which is usually negative negatively reinforcing their emotional experience. And I ask them what is their favorite cartoon character and to imagine that self-talk in that cartoon character's voice. My favorite are Porky Pig and Beavis and Butthead. So I imagine my negative self-talk in those voices and I can't stop laughing. I can't take myself seriously anymore. I've had clients say, can I say it out loud in those voices? I'm like, whatever works for you. And this is just a very simple way of defusing that emotion from who you believe yourself to be, right? From who you experience yourself as. So those are some fun techniques. The second is to accept emotions as they don't last forever. So a basic premise of ACT and many other theories that talk about emotion regulation is that feelings come and go in minutes and hours usually. They don't last for days and weeks on end. You're going to have another emotional experience. So two techniques are leaves on a stream and then sushi train. And I'll talk about each of those. So imagine sitting beside a stream and it's autumn now. So the leaves are floating down the stream. And imagine putting your unwanted feelings, each one on a new leaf, and you watch it float down the stream, right? So you can see how this is also a mindfulness technique. Another way to use this is to say, well, what are the feelings I would like to feel instead? And put those feelings on the leaves and watch those new feelings come down the stream towards you. And you can pull a leaf out of the stream if you want to feel this, or you can pull a leaf out of the stream if you want to feel that. Sushi train. So I haven't seen this in the Central Valley, but I love sushi. So I go to the Bay Area for it a lot. And I've seen this in Bay Area sushi restaurants. There's usually a boat, not a train, a boat or some conveyance where the sushi chefs are in the middle and you can see the different sushi dishes going past you and you pick up the ones that you want. Same thing as leaves on a stream. You can watch your feelings come and go, just knowing that feelings are a circle and they come around, they'll come and they'll go. Or you can pick up the ones that you want. So good way to do that. You can also talk about this technique in terms of riding the bus, which a lot of our clients will identify with. People get on the bus and people leave the bus. And feelings are the same. Your feelings will get on the bus with you and the feelings will leave the bus with you. Or you can leave the bus and leave your feelings on the bus to go away. So again, another metaphor to use. And the final one for ACT is focusing on the present moment. And this is a technique around focus. So first, just imagine yourself being in a really loud restaurant. There's lots of people talking. You can hear lots of kitchen noises. And you know how you have to focus on the person in front of you in order to hear what they're saying because all these sounds are so distracting. This is similar to doing that. So I tell the person, imagine that they're sitting and behind them somewhere, maybe off to the right, is a radio that's vocalizing their self-talk, all the doom and gloom in their self-talk. And so your job as the client is to ignore that noise and that distraction behind you and focus on what's in front of you and what you're doing right now. Again, it's a focus technique and it's a grounding technique and it's about, being in the present moment. I sometimes have them say, if they have trouble, if they have trouble not focusing on the radio, I tell them to imagine the doom and gloom coming out of the radio in their favorite cartoon character's voice. And so you can combine techniques like this. So in the large group, we talked about picking one of these emotion regulation skills and practice coaching it. So I'm going to go back to these skills and ask you to think for 2 or 3 minutes, which of these 6 would you like to try with a consumer? And take a few minutes to think through how you would coach them. What would you say? And I've done some of those examples here as we went through this video. So take a few minutes, pick one of these 6 and think about how you would coach the client through the activity. Okay. As always, what is the one thing you will do this week to increase your use of distress tolerance and emotion regulation skills? Be specific. Think about what you're going to do. What are you going to take away to clients this week? A little bit about schedule. I'm on vacation next week, so there's no training next week. I will see you in 2 weeks on November 5th, Election Day. We'll discuss managing workload stress and avoiding burnout. Also, be sure to look at the resources page. I've got a brief overview of trauma informed therapy, a link to Russ Harris's YouTube website, and the feelings wheel, which I think all of us should print out and have in our offices. So I hope you are doing well, and I will see you in 2 weeks. Thanks. Bye bye.